Adam here. As people continue to trickle in as they transition over. But yeah, thank you all for joining us for part 6 of the Konik Leadership Series. I'm Brad Konik, CEO of Konik Technical Talent Network. We are a recruiting firm based out of Minneapolis, and we specialize in engineering, manufacturing, and AEC to include architecture and construction. We've placed over 30,000 candidates across Minnesota and the Midwest. We have over 100 years of combined recruiting experience on our team, and we've got a network that we've been building for the past 49 years. A line I always use is that you take that recruiting experience, you plug it into our network, and you've essentially supercharged your recruiting efforts. So we place candidates on a contract to direct, and direct basis. If you want more information, certainly you can reach out directly to myself or anyone on our team, or visit our website at koniknetwork.com. That's Konik network.com. Just a little bit of a report what we're seeing in the labor market. We saw a significant decrease through third and fourth quarter in total number of open positions that we had. It was actually nearly a 40% drop. I think there was a lot of fears of inflation, recession, et cetera. Since then, we saw an uptick in the first quarter of about 10%, and then we saw a significant bump again in the second quarter of new positions coming in, about a 25% increase. So to me, it reflects that people are starting and experiencing business picking back up. Again, specific to our areas of expertise in that engineering, manufacturing, architecture sector. So from a supply perspective, from a candidate perspective, we saw a very similar thing in the third and fourth quarter. I think not only companies, but candidates, as candidates and employees sensed the uncertainty in the market, they tended to hold off on exploring new opportunities. There's always a bit of a risk in changing positions. And so we saw a significant or noticeable drop in the total number of active candidates within our network. The good news is, flip into first quarter, we started to see that pick up, and then second quarter significantly picked back up. Similar numbers, about 25% increase in the total number of candidates active within our network. So again, those would be the total number of candidates that essentially we're working with and presenting on new opportunities within the market. So, the market continues to be very, very tight. It's very competitive for candidates, but all of those things are good signs. The demand is up, and the great thing is that the supply is up. So if there's anything we can do to help any of you out on the technical recruiting side of things, certainly let us know. A little bit more, and then I'll get it over to Adam, but our company's core purpose is to positively impact people's lives. That includes our candidates, our clients, our community, and our entire network. And it was to that purpose that we decided to offer up this leadership series at no charge to everyone within our network. During the presentation, if you have questions, you can post those in the questions box. No, not the comments box, the questions box. I'll be keeping an eye out for those. And when appropriate, I'll pose them during the presentation. Otherwise, I'll queue them up. We're going to have a Q&A session following Adam's presentation. I'll get those queued up, and so if you can, please stick around for the Q&A session. And certainly, like I said, feel free to add your questions throughout the presentation. So with that, I'll introduce Adam. Adam Carroll is our presenter. He has been and will be the presenter for all of the sessions for the Konik Leadership Series. We have 2 more. We're skipping August because people are busy and they're hopefully at the lake and enjoying themselves. And then we'll be back again September and October. So please feel free to pre-register for those. Certainly, if you have a takeaway or this inspires you to continue your development as a leader, we'd love to have you in the follow-up sessions September and October. So Adam is the co-founder of Renzo Experience, which is a leadership development and culture consulting firm based out of the Midwest. Adam's worked with thousands of leaders to create clarity and alignment within their organization. So he's a 2-time TED Talk speaker. One of his talks has exceeded 6 million views on YouTube. So if you haven't seen that, you should take the time to look that up and check that out. But yeah, I'm excited about today's topic. I've been through this session before and excited to learn more and get some additional takeaways. The topic is building a success foundation for your team. So what I can finish with is I hope that Konik positively impacts everyone's lives today. And with that, Adam, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Brad. Greatly appreciated. And as I mentioned before, it's nice to see so many familiar names come through on the attendee list. I know a number of you have been with me before in some of the past sessions, so I welcome you back. And if you're brand new, know that there are a number of these sessions that have been recorded that are available for you. And they're available at koniknetwork.com/leadership series. We'll get that in the chat box as well for you to click on the link. All of these have built upon themselves, and I want to give you just a little bit of background on where the content comes from, how it's been developed and curated over time. I am part of a consultant consortium, and we do work with organizations all over the world. We've worked with companies as small as 10, 15, 20 people, all the way up to organizations with 4,000 to 10,000 people. And our goal has always been to architect a culture where people love to come to work. Hence the name Renzo Experience. We wanted to throw homage to Renzo Piano, the groundbreaking architect from Italy, who has his name on commissioned work like the Centre Georges Pompidou in Paris, the Shard in London, and coincidentally, the Come and Go convenience store headquarters in Des Moines, Iowa. How that got into that category, I don't know, but they did it. So we love the idea of Renzo being this world-class architect who designs buildings that people love to enter. And we wanted to, again, pay homage to him in our business name, and that companies need to design a culture where their people love to come to work. And so today we're going to talk about how do you build a success foundation for your team. Ultimately, this is the key to effective one-on-ones. And I'd love to just take the temperature of the audience here, if you don't mind commenting in the chat box. But if you would let me know how often, how frequently are you doing one-on-ones with your team? If you lead a team, is it weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually? What does your traditional one-on-one cadence look like? How often are you holding your one-on-ones? Good. So I'm seeing monthly. I'm seeing every week, every other week, bi-weekly. This is great. And what I thought I might see is, oh, annually, we have them once a year. Shane says Wednesdays. That's fantastic. So know this, all of you are absolutely going in the right direction in terms of the cadence and the frequency of these meetings. What we have found over the last several years in terms of leadership and employee engagement is that the more frequently you're doing these one-on-ones and the more clear and aligned your team is, the more A, successful they feel, and B, the more successful the company is on the initiatives that have been laid forward. So I'm going to do a little bit of a kind of a review preview here. So for those who are either here last month or were not here last month, if you were here, this is going to be just a refresher. And if you were not here last month, I'm going to give you a really quick primer into what we went through and then why it's really important for today's topic. So last month, we were talking about the 3-year letter and the power of the 3-year letter, which I'll explain what that is here in a moment. The gist of the talk last month was we tend to overestimate what can be done in 1 year, and we underestimate what can be done in 3. And yet what's happening in companies everywhere, no matter what industry we're finding, is that longevity is at stake if the team members don't know exactly where they're headed, and not just know where they're headed in a year, but know what the 3 or 5 or 10-year plan is. Despite the fact they may not see themselves there in 5 or 10 years, we need to extend out the vision to 3 or 5 or 10 years to give them this long-standing roadmap. We tend to overestimate what can be done in a year, meaning when you hire someone brand new, and specifically if they are, no shade here by any means, but if they're a millennial or they're a Gen Z, there may be a mindset of, I need to be in the VP role within a year or 18 months. And why aren't they promoting me? I should be promoted sooner. And so that's the overestimation about what can be done in a year. But within 3 years' time, we could jump a couple of levels within a company, pending our production and our level of efficiency and proficiency in the work. So some of this is setting the stage for your team that we want them to have goals for a year, but we really want them to look out 3 years, because 3 years is probably going to be a little bit more realistic in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. I mentioned the book Think and Grow Rich, which was a book written in 1937. It's still one of the most impactful books today. In that book, the author Napoleon Hill said the one common element among all successful people was they all had definiteness of purpose. They knew exactly what they were doing every single day. And part of the reason I'm excited to see your one-on-ones or every other week, bi-weekly on Wednesdays, you're doing an L10 weekly, one-on-ones can be daily, which is awesome, Shane, is that you can bring up the definiteness of purpose on a regular basis with your team. And I'll be really transparent here. I had a call with one of my teammates today, and this is an incredibly essential part of my team who happens to live in Boston. She and I have missed each other the past couple of days. And she said, I was just feeling like I was flapping in the wind the last couple of days. And number one, some leaders may take that as somewhat offensive or as harsh criticism or feedback. And she said, I just need you to know that I felt like I was flapping in the wind. And I said, I really appreciate the feedback. Clearly, we need to be in touch more often, even if it's just voice texts, to make sure I know what she's working on and she knows what would be a high priority for me. In essence, what she was saying was definiteness of purpose was unclear. I mentioned the book Outwitting the Devil, which is another book by Napoleon Hill. The difference behind this book and Think and Grow Rich was Think and Grow Rich was written in 1937. Napoleon Hill wrote Outwitting the Devil in 1938, but it wasn't published until 2011. And in this book, the main theme is in life, there are drifters and there are non-drifters. And one group can be easily blown off course. Those would be the drifters. The others will succeed no matter what they encounter. So some of this suggests that on your team, you need to know who are your drifters, who are those that can be easily blown off course, and who are your non-drifters, who are the people that are so locked into what they're doing. Candidly, they're probably the task list, to-do list people. They don't like leaving until their task list is done. Whereas some of the drifters might be a little more social in nature. They might be a little bit more prone to bright, shiny object syndrome. And in that case, some of those one-on-ones need to be, yes, let's ideate, but then let's also get really down to brass tacks about what needs to get done over the coming week, as an example. I mentioned the book last month, Be Your Future Self Now. And if you were to take away one thing at all from the session today, this would be a very interesting book to give to all of your team and say, let's read this and let's talk about it. Because what you are one day becoming, you are right now creating. I'm going to say that again. What you are one day becoming, you are right now creating, both as a team and individually. And in Be Your Future Self Now, what Dr. Benjamin Hardy talks about is that in order to maximize our time and efforts to maximum benefit, we must stop working for and looking at who we are now, instead focus on who we want to be in the future. He talks about using this thing called prospection. And prospection is what separates humans from other species. It's the ability to look at our future selves and make decisions today based on who we want to become. And in many companies that we've worked within, what we find is that they're making decisions based on today's activities, but not based on what they want to create. And so we have to have this future forward-looking perspective on where we're going that leads to us creating the successful foundation that we're going to talk about today. So what I'm going to engage you in, hopefully, is the ability to create prospection both for yourself, for your team, and then the team individually needs to do it for themselves. Meaning, you yourself as a leader need to understand, who do you want to be 3 years out? Where do you want to be? What do you want to be experiencing? Secondly, your team, what does that need to look like 3 years out? How big is it? How consolidated is it? How disparate is it? If it's either everyone's in the office or everyone is working hybrid, or it's a remote, completely remote setup. What does that look like? And how will you communicate 3 years out? And how are you working towards that? And then engaging each individual person on your team to create a 3-year letter, a 3-year vision for themselves, looking backwards and saying, based on the last 3 years, here are all the things that I want to create. And again, I'm going to circle back to why that's important here in a moment. The reason we do this and the reason we write the letter is based on a book called A Happy Pocket Full of Money. And it's a book not about money, but about quantum physics. And the first 2 chapters, as I mentioned last month, are a slog. But once you get through them, he's describing how quantum physics works. The rest is incredibly pleasurable to read. In this book, David Cameron Giocondi, the author, says, you are constantly creating another dimension where what you truly desire exists. The goal is to bring that dimension closer to the one you're living in currently. In other words, prospection. We are making decisions today based on what we want to accomplish 3 years out. And so we're going to talk about how we use these tools and how we create this successful foundation. One of the keys is in creating the 3-year letter. And hopefully many of you, if you were here with me last month, you took this to heart, you had your team do it. But when you write your 3 letter, you're going to write it from a personal or business perspective. The document itself becomes a North Star document in your life, meaning that all of the decisions that you're going to make support the future you. So if you're rereading your 3-year letter and someone presents an opportunity or a conference to attend or something that may distract you or detract you from what you're currently doing, you would know based on your 3-year letter, this is a no. And it makes it much, much easier to do that. If the decision doesn't support your future vision of your future self, then it's an easy no. This is the 3-year letter. And why I'm asking you to do this with your team is the next step. And this is how we get into some of the success foundation that we talk about in companies. What I will share with you before I dive in is that at Renzo Experience, one of the things we wanted to do was take complicated ideas or complex theories or initiatives and boil them down to the simplest form. And here's what that looked like in many companies. We were at an organization that had about 4,000 employees, all on site, all various different business units that had to work together cohesively, but weren't. And the challenge was that they had a leader in the executive role that had been a rear admiral in the Navy. And this gentleman's perspective on leadership was, if I want your opinion, I will ask you for it. Now imagine working for someone where you came into a meeting and you said, sir, I have an idea. My assumption was they all had to call him sir. But sir, I have an idea and it's about X, Y, or Z. And the rear admiral from the Navy would say, maybe I'll hear it, or that's not something we're focused on right now. Or if it was an idea he heard and he just said, no, not something we're going to do. And you heard that over and over and over again, eventually you would stop bringing ideas to the table. And a new executive director came in, held that very same position the rear admiral was in, and said, I want to envision what this place is going to be like. And furthermore, I want all of you to envision what your future job will be like and your life in this job will be like. And she essentially did one thing that was very, very savvy. We had encouraged her to do this, and it was bring the outside life into the business. And she said, what does that even mean? And we said, you know, these people, they come to work for a specific reason. It may be just to get a paycheck. It may be because their life's purpose is in the work that they do. It may be that they just need to get out of the house during the day. Whatever the reason is, let's find out what their reason is. And the way we're going to do that is paint a picture of what your life would be like in an ideal setting. And so these folks wrote their 3-year letter. And then we went through the process that I'm going to share with you in terms of one-on-ones that could be done monthly. They could be done quarterly. They could be done, as many of you are doing in the chat, on a weekly or biweekly basis. Remember on the 3-year letter that when you have your team write them, they're writing the 3-year letter in present tense as if it is 3 years from today. or whatever day you're going to have them do this. So in this case, it would be sometime in July in 2026, looking backwards and saying, I'm so happy and grateful that all of these things have occurred. The letter ideally should be written to yourself, your spouse, your kids, someone that you hold yourself accountable to. And again, it's personal and business. Your teammate can share with you what they feel comfortable sharing. My 2 cents is that if they're not willing to share personal information with you about what they'd like to accomplish personally or what they're going through personally, then it may mean that the rapport you've built with them is not sufficient enough to trust you with some of the more personal matters. And this is where, and I'm sure we're going to bring this up in the Q&A section, but this is where for leaders, there's a fine line that we have to navigate, which is how much do I want to know or need to know about my team and what happens personally, and how much do I not need to know? And that fine line is sort of highlighted or divided by, do we know what drives the person from a purpose standpoint? So are they coming in every day because in your worlds, they love the creative aspect of engineering? Maybe they love problem solving. Perhaps as an architect, they just don't feel complete or whole unless they're being creative, unless they're designing something. Maybe it's, as it is in Renzo Piano's case, that the purpose, the drive is to see this magnificent creation in its physical glory. Whatever that purpose is, we need to find out exactly what it is up front, okay? Include where you're writing from in the letter, the place that you write the letter, why you're there. All of that should be in the letter in as much detail as possible, and I'll explain why we do that in a second. This is the process of that 3-year letter. So if you were here last month, you know this was all kind of review. And if you weren't here, you can watch the entire program on the recording that'll give you a sense of how to do this. And I've listened to myself present enough times to know that when you watch it, you could actually watch it at 1.2 or 1.5 times speed and still get everything you need to out of the program. So it may not take you 60 minutes, it may take you 30 or 35, right, to get through it all. So here are the themes to consider in that letter: what you've accomplished, benefits you've received, obstacles or habits that you have removed from your life to get better at what you're doing, your impact on others, personal and or business, and any growth areas in your life, be they spiritual, physical, financial, mental, or emotional. Now, why this is important is when I have my team write their 3-year letters and we go through a values assessment, I want to know what are their core values. I want to know spiritually, what do you want to achieve? Physically, what do you want to achieve? And in those questions, if someone says, I'd like to meditate at least once a day, then I will do whatever I can to make sure that they are able to carve out time to do that. I'm asking them, hey, did you meditate this week? How many times? And if nothing else, what I'm doing is holding them accountable to who they say they're going to be. What I'm doing is helping them become the best version of themselves. And I'm not doing it in an overly demanding father figure way. I'm coming up alongside them as a coach or a guide and saying, this is what you said. How is that going? How can I support you? You said it's important to you. On the physical side, if someone says, I'm going to run a marathon in 2023, I'm going to ask them or even send them documents that are training guides for a couch to marathon kind of deal. Financial, what do you want your savings to be? Have you increased your 401k percentage? I'm asking those questions to help them achieve whatever goal they're setting. And then mental, emotional are interesting. And this is where we're kind of, again, drawing a fine line between mental health being a core issue in companies today and identifying where someone is at mentally and emotionally on a day-by-day basis. The way I do that with my team, when I check in with them very first in the meeting, if we're doing one-on-ones, and again, based on all of your answers every other week, bi-weekly, Wednesdays, the first thing I ask is, hey, I'm going to do just a self-preservation check here, 1 to 10. How are you feeling? And what I'm asking them to do is tell me on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you mentally and emotionally? Are you stressed? Are you blitzed at home? Is there something going on that, is taking all your energy, mental and otherwise? On a scale of 1 to 10, where are you? And my team will be typically pretty candid with me. One of my teammates, she said, Adam, I'm a 4 because my brother is in the hospital right now and it's occupying all my mental energy. And I said, I appreciate you telling me. What can I do to support it? And then I know the challenge for us leaders is not knowing what's going on at home. And here's what I will tell you. This is a little bit more of an anecdotal scenario, but it's happening, I guarantee, with some of your staff and your clients. We work with the development team and we have one core developer, one coder that works with us. And I heard from the team, from their leadership team, their project manager, yesterday on a call that the developer had been out for 2 days. And he was out because his wife had a pretty serious illness and she is pregnant. And he's very concerned about this person, about his wife, obviously. And I said to them, I am 100%, I want to be 100% like gracious about the fact that he needs to be there with his wife. I have no problem with that. However, what I'll tell you is you've got to be more transparent with me about what's happening with some of your team so that I can have that grace when things go wrong and they're not responding right away. Right. So what happens quite often is we're not willing to share some of that stuff, i.e. an employee to their leader. And then when balls get dropped and things fall through the cracks, we as leaders might not react with the amount of grace that we could otherwise if we have that level of transparency with our team. So this is part of the Success Foundation, is just a clear level of communication. Last thing in the letter, the theme to consider is an assessment of your life progress. How are things going so far? So this would involve the content in the letter. Now, one last reminder, all of these slides are available. So whenever I'm done, we PDF all the slides. We make them available on the website, which again is koniknetwork.com/leadership series. We'll make sure the link is in chat and I'll give you the link at the end of the session today. So here is the question. On a scale of 1 to 10, and I'm going to have y'all answer this in chat if you don't mind. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you know your team? And I want you to answer that in terms of thinking through individually each person. How well do you know what drives them, what their family situation is, where there's wellness or illness in the family? How well do you know your team on a scale of 1 to 10? Go ahead and drop that for me in chat. I'm seeing 6 to 7, 6, 3, 7.5, 7. This is great. 7s. By the way, when people answer a question 1 to 10, 7, it's funny because I'm like, well, that's pretty average number, right? Like, I think I'm pretty good, but I may not know for sure, but I think I'm pretty good. 7, 4 is in there. Appreciate the honesty on the 3. That's amazing. And you all have grace from me on whatever your number is, because you may have a team that's spread out all over the country. You may have folks that are working remotely or hybrid in a capacity where they're coming in 1 or 2 days a week and you don't really have as much engagement with them as you once did. That's 100% understandable. What is coming to light, particularly in the last 2 years after COVID, after all of the pandemic era business changes that happened, is that we actually have to know our teams better now than we did before. And the reason for that is because the way we work has changed and the work is slightly changing. Then what we actually need to do is get in touch with our teammates more. And it may seem like, where on earth am I going to carve time out to do it? These don't have to be long calls. They can be 5-minute calls, 10-minute calls. Some sessions ago, I gave the format of the HEAT meeting. The HEAT meeting is an acronym, HEAT. And a HEAT meeting could be 5 minutes or it could be 50 minutes. And a HEAT meeting basically stands for H is how are you? So it's a quick call. I might call Brad Konik and say, Brad, I'm on my way to an appointment. I have like 10 minutes. Do you have 10 minutes? And then I would ask him, how are you? And he'd give me the Minnesota nice answer. I'm fine. I'm great. Right as rain, fine as frog's hair. And then I would say, Brad, how are you really? and you'd say, you know what? I'm a little nervous. My son's going to college. He's going to be away from the family. It's the first time. We're all just, we think we're going to miss him. I got a lot going on at home. Summer's always busy for us. He's going to tell me what's going on. And I'm going to say, Brad, and this is where E comes in the heat meeting. What do you expect from this week? What are your expectations, both of you and of me as your leader? What are your expectations? And Brad's going to say, well, Adam, I hope you create a great webinar on Thursday. That's what I need from you, right? And I might ask, what do you expect of yourself? I'm going to get this done and this done and this done. So I know to loop back with him at the end of the week and find out how did it go. A is either I'm going to acknowledge, I'm going to appreciate, or I'm going to hold accountable. So I'm going to say, Brad, I know that you said last week you were going to get XYZ done. How did that go? That's accountable. Appreciate is, Brad, I just want you to know how much we appreciate you on the team. Like you bring the team together. You have such a cohesive vision. We just really appreciate you. And then acknowledgement is, Brad, I just want to acknowledge you. I know things are tough at home, and yet you show up and you give it your all every day. And this is key as a leader in this heat meeting. If you're acknowledging someone, you are giving them a reputation to live into, because maybe they aren't performing up to snuff. But when you say, I just want to acknowledge you, that I know you bring it every day. And we have a high expectation of where you're performing. And I know you have a lot going on, but we also know that you're going to bring that to work. And then T is, know that together as a team, we're going to get through this. That's it. So I'm almost to my spot. I just wanted to touch base and have a quick chat with you. That's a heat meeting. How well do you know your team is based on how many of those heat meetings you're having on a regular basis, and asking questions like, how are the kids and what's going on at home? And how are your parents? Those kinds of questions. Where are you guys going on vacation this year? The more we know the team, the easier it is to get into the next content. So I've mentioned on a number of these sessions, there's 3 fundamental responsibilities of leaders. They craft a vision, they build alignment among the team, and they champion execution. So if you are leading a team, these 3 things to remember every day are, they need to know what my vision is. I need to make sure everyone is rowing in the same direction towards that vision. And I, as the leader, need to champion that everyone's doing what they need to do to make sure that vision is accomplished, that it's executed. But this is where things get a little interesting, because as simple as this is, it's complicated on a variety of levels. What your employees want, what they desire from you is this. Number 1, they want a clear vision. And they want to know that that vision, if it changes, you're going to let them know that it's changed. And I would venture to guess that many of you in the audience right now have probably been in a company where the vision changed and you didn't know it. True or true? Say true out loud if this is true. True or true? It's true. You've been in companies where the vision changed and the leadership was like, yeah, everyone knows it's changed. And everyone else is like, nope, didn't hear. So they want a clear vision and they want it clarified if it does change. Secondly, they want alignment. They want to know that the work I'm doing relates well to the work Brad's doing, to the work that supports the vision. And all the way up and down the chain, we're all aligned on where we're headed. But what happens quite often is sales upsets fulfillment, right? Or marketing makes a promise that support can't support. And what happens is we're out of alignment when that occurs. And I'll give you a really concrete example. There are Wendy's locations around me that are closing. And I talked to the owner of the Wendy's franchise, who happens to be a regular at the pizza place where my son works. And we struck up this conversation one day. And I said, how are things going at Wendy's? I would guess that would be a really challenging environment. He said, here's the challenge. I can't find people to work for me. They're not reliable. And the mothership is making promises in marketing that we're going to be open from breakfast until midnight, 6 or 7 days a week. I can't do that, right? That is out of alignment from the mothership, the Wendy's corporate office, marketing these promises that the franchisees are like, how are we ever going to do this, right? So your employees want alignment. And last but not least, they desire purposeful work. They want to do work that matters. And the best example that I saw of this recently was I do work for an organization called Agriculture Future of America. And this is an organization out of Kansas City that recruits or attracts college students that are at the top of their game. They call it a leaders conference, not a leadership conference, because they're attracting leaders already, but they consider it like a finishing school for their leaders. And at the end of one of the sessions, a keynote speaker got up and said, in the next 10 to 20 years, there will be 60 million people that will be in jeopardy of going hungry because we will have a food shortage. And it is up to your generation to solve that challenge. And you saw these kids sit back in their chairs and sit up and look at each other with this look of like, it's up to us. And what they knew deep down, and I asked the facilitators of this group, I said, I heard this statement and I'm curious, who designed it? What was the purpose? I get that this is probably a reality based on some projections. And the director said, what we know about our students is they want purpose in their lives. They don't want to go get a job. They want to go get something that satisfies their life's work. And solving for hunger, about 80% of them said that was important to them. Now, I think that's relevant. So when you start asking your team, what drives you? What do you find purpose in? What's the meaning of your work? And they say, I love to solve problems. Then by God, there ought to be problems that are put in front of them on a regular basis saying, I know you love solving problems. We have a problem for you to solve. Could you help us with this? And that person who gets driven by that will say, absolutely, let's go, right? So I've said before, there's a difference between management and leadership. Management is about behaviors and it's about activities. Both of these get results. So if you're managing a teammate, what you're doing is you're saying, I need you to show up on time. I need you to have a good attitude. I need you to stop bugging so-and-so in the office, right? You're going to get results from them. But at that point, you have their hands and maybe you have their head. But if we're talking about leadership and we're talking about creating a successful foundation for you to build upon with your team, what you're talking to your team about are the outcomes and the impact that they have. So you doing this design work or revising this change order, right? The outcome of this is we're going to save our client tens of thousands of dollars through this redesign. It's a big, big deal. This is going to win us more business. So you solving this value engineering problem or challenge, this is going to be awesome. You're going to talk about impact. When we do this, the impact to the bottom line of the company could mean the difference between leveling up a position or two in the next 3 years. So just know that the impact of this is massive. And what you're doing is you're speaking right to the purpose that this person has. You're essentially speaking to their heart. When you have someone's heart in the business, now you're a leader. And one of the only ways to get to someone's heart is to speak their language, right? You're talking about what's important to them, and B, engaging them at the heart level. What do you love to do? What do you love about this kind of work? What originally got you into engineering, architecture, construction? What was it? And, what's amazing is no matter where someone sits in a company, one of my clients does dirt contracting work and utility work. And I went out to the field and I interviewed a gentleman who's on the field maintenance crew. So he goes out in his maintenance truck and he works on heavy diesel equipment in the field. And I said to this young man, his name's Kyle, what do you love about this job? And he said, every day I get to learn, I get to solve problems, and I get to connect with people. And I said, in order, what's the most important for you? And he goes, connect with people. And this is what's interesting. This is a young guy who had been in the shop and he wanted to go out in the field. And it's usually the reverse. People are in the field, want to go back in the shop where it's a nice controlled environment. And Kyle said, I want to go to the field because I want to connect with all the guys who are actually working on this equipment. And his leader heard that, put him out there, and he flourished in the job. So it's about purpose. So here's what we do with the 3-year letter. And now we're getting into really the heat of this. I know it's the last 5 minutes or so. And Brad, you're jumping in. Is there Q&A?
Yeah, one quick question that I have is, if you can go back one slide.
Yeah.
Is there a sprinkling of both of these? I understand that you want to lean more heavily towards the leadership, but if you have an employee that is not showing up on time or not doesn't have the activities that you're looking for.
Yep.
How do you balance the two?
Yeah.
I guess would like to know.
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, this is kind of the delicate balance and dance that leaders have to make. If someone is not performing up to par, one of the previous sessions we've done was around setting crystal clear expectations. And so some of this may be, am I unclear in what the expectations are? Or is the other person unclear of what my expectations are of them? Let's get that underway first. And then secondly, and this is where the heart element kind of comes in leadership, is grabbing someone who maybe you've given multiple chances and opportunities to prove you wrong with, but sitting them down and saying, listen, tell me about what's going on at home. What is preventing you from delivering on what the expectations of this job are? Because I fully believe you to be able and capable to do this, but it doesn't appear that you are. So what is in your way right now? Is it at home? Is it relationship? Are there mental health challenges? What is it there that is in your way? And this is where, from a leadership perspective, going in the Wayback Machine to our very first session, the drivers, the analyticals, you may not have time or patience to have this conversation. And this is where you've got to maybe dig deep into your EQ bucket, have some emotional quotient with your team, and just tell me what's up, what's going on. And what they're going to do is they're going to soften and hopefully be somewhat transparent with you. The bottom line though, Brad, is if you go down that path and you try and leverage the heart level, and here's the outcome that's occurring, here's the impact on the team of you not showing up every day, and they continue to just kind of like thumb their nose at what you're saying, our goal is to either help them out or help them out. That's it. And so as leaders, we can help them out and get them into a better role or position, or we can help them out. We got to get them out the door. And it doesn't make them a bad person. It just makes them a bad fit for what your expectations and what your vision for that role and the company are.
Yep.
And I think that's that is probably one of the hardest things that a leader will do, is you've got someone that's been with you for a long time. And it's not that you paid them too much, it's that you've just paid them too long. You know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
They need to be out the door. And our goal, honestly, we've again mentioned this in previous sessions, it's about finding people's unique ability and plugging their unique ability in. Because if they are landing and working in their unique ability on a day-by-day basis, they will be finding fulfillment. They'll love their work. And those that have gotten out of their unique ability or got pulled into some other role, maybe we need to sit down with them and say, what do you want to be experiencing? Because clearly this is not it. So what is it you want to do?
Yep.
Does that make sense, Brad?
It does. Yep.
Yep.
Thank you very much. I just, my experience, I tend to get pulled into the management sector or
Absolutely.
Side of that.
Yep.
A lot. It's hard not to. So I appreciate that. Yep. Thank you.
No doubt. And Samantha, I'll come back to your question. I have about 2 more slides and then we'll dive into that. The 30, 60, 90-day accountability is, again, a very, very simplified model we use at Renzo and we teach people how to use, because by and large, there are a number of leaders who will hold one-on-ones, but over time, they'll become less and less effective. Because it's like, well, it's another meeting and we did the same thing. And particularly if you're doing L10s, if you're part of EOS and traction, is over time, they kind of feel rote. I mean, it kind of feels like, well, we're doing this by memory now. There's nothing new or helpful in it. And so every now and again, we need to pull out of the L10 and just shake it up a little bit. And I recommend this being a quarterly conversation. But some of your teammates who may have a little bit more bright, shiny object syndrome, they need 30 days. Every 30 days, let's have this convo. So they've written their 3-year letter contextually. You know what's important to them. And I'll give you a really simple example. Somebody says, I want to run a marathon in 2023. That's one of my visions. Or in 2024, by 2026, I'm going to have done this. And so as a leader, you go, hey, I noticed you have all these things. One of your accomplishments that you'd like to do is to run a marathon. So could we say that is a focus area for you, is improving your health or your ability to go out and do cardio, and you want to go run this marathon? Somebody says, yes, I do. Okay, so the focus area is running a marathon. That's number one. These are areas that will help drive results. Number two is, well, what are you committed to? So if your commitment is to have run a marathon by the end of next year, what do you need to do to impact that focus area? And the person's going to say, well, I need to run. I guess I need to commit that I'm going to start running a little bit. And as a leader, I might say, cool. So what action steps are needed by when? Are you running right now? And they'd say, no, I haven't run in 5 years. Okay, so what steps are needed by when? Let's start with going out and running for 5 minutes, right? And you may not prescribe anything. Just say, well, what would you need to do by when? And they're going to say, I need to put it on my calendar 2 days a week that I'm going to go jog, and I'm at least going to jog 10 minutes at a time. Okay, cool. And then move up from there. What are your expected results in doing this? So in the next month, before we have another conversation like this, what are your specific outcomes you're looking for? And they're going to say something like, well, I'm looking to have an easier time day by day every time I go out for a run. I want to enjoy it. My specific outcome is I really want to enjoy running. And hopefully then I lose some weight, I feel better, I have more energy, drink more water, et cetera, et cetera. And this is the important question for all leaders, one of the ones that I want to stress, and I want you to underline, highlight, score, and get really good at. The achievement bucket is the question around what personal benefit do you receive from doing that activity? So if you're going to get out and you're going to run 10 minutes 2 times a week from now until the end of the month, what personal benefit is it for you? What is the feeling of satisfaction that you'll have in the next 4 weeks when you do this and you look back, go and say, I can't believe it was 5 years since I've done this. What's the personal benefit for you? And they're going to put themselves in a future state and say, well, I suppose I'll feel accomplishment and satisfaction, and I'll feel healthier, and I'll feel like I actually have control of my health. And as a leader, that's where you go, awesome. I want you to hang on to that, because I want to circle back to that as we go along. Now, let me put this into context from a business perspective. You have an engineer that says, I really like to get certified in whatever it may be, LEED or green, or you have a PM that says, I really want to go get Agile or Scrum certified. Okay, great. So what is the focus area? My education in getting the certification. Cool. What's your commitment? That I am going to, by the end of blank, I will have this certification. So what steps would be needed by when in order for you to do this? And you can see all I'm doing is going down this and helping them see what's important, see how they're going to do it, and then feel what it's like to have accomplished that at the end of the process. The feeling what it's like at the end of the process is really critical, because what most folks will do, they'll set a goal, but the goal is some abstract, arbitrary thing that has no emotion tied to it whatsoever. And we all have over 100 emotions that we feel on a daily basis that will all inspire us to do something or not do something. So if we are feeling the emotion of that will make me feel satisfied, happy, whatever. I mean, candidly, when I trained to run a half marathon 4 years ago now, my motivation was, I want my wife to be like, wow, you look great. That was one of my main motivators, was for her to tell me, wow, you look like you're really getting in shape. So I am a person, my love language is words of affirmation. And I finally had to say, I really need you to acknowledge that I'm doing this. And she's like, oh, I didn't realize that was important to you. Well, that would be me clarifying my expectations. So whatever your team needs, know that this is how we do it. 30, 60, 90-day accountability check-ins going through this list. This is what I'd recommend in terms of how you change your one-on-ones just ever so slightly to, let's talk about the focus areas that are really important in the business right now for you. And they go, boom, 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 3 of them, right? Maybe 1 personal, 2 business. Okay, what are you committed to? What actions do you need to take? What are your expected results? How will that feel? What's that going to be like for you? And then use that knowledge to continually leverage them at the heart level. That's it. Super simple. We take these complex ideas, we boil them down to this is what it requires to do. The reason it's so important, and this may be a stat, it may be one that surprises you, but on any flight going across the sky on a daily basis, a flying plane is off course 90% of the time. And because of the metrics and the diagnostics that they're running on the plane all the time, the maps and the tools that the pilot has in the cockpit, they are constantly bringing the plane back on course. It's constantly correcting. But to think that we go from LA to New York in a straight shot is false. We go from LA to New York or New York to LA, and it kind of zigzags all its way across the country until it gets to its final destination. And our teams, I would venture to guess, are 90% off course most of the time. And that may be extreme, but I know that on a day-by-day basis, my team is working on things that if I were looking over their shoulder, I'd be like, this is a waste of your time. Why are you doing this? Or I would be doing this differently than you're doing this, and prioritizing it differently, and so on and so forth. So know that a flying plane is off course 90% of the time, and your team needs these effective one-on-ones to course correct and come back to center to do what is in their unique ability and to be at the heart level. Okay, so I'm going to go back to questions. Samantha, I know you have a question here. I'd love to take anyone else's questions around this, and I know Brad, you have some queued up. However, I do want to point out, if you go to koniknetwork.com/leadership series, you'll probably come to an opt-in page that will allow you to plug in your name and email address. You'll then gain access to all of the sessions in the series. And you can see we have the aligned leader, difficult conversations, setting crystal clear expectations, and a whole host of others. Here's what I would tell you. This is like a crash course for leaders. So if you have someone that just needs to kind of spit polish their leadership skills, put them through this. It's all on behalf of Konik. It's all open to the public, but this is a great opportunity to help impact other people's lives by going through it. Okay, I'll pause, Brad. I'm kicking it back to you for Q&A.
Yes. So Samantha has a question here posted. How do you do one-on-ones regularly when you have a very large team? One of the teams that she leads one of the team leads has 10 direct reports.
Yeah, this is a great question, Samantha. You know, this has forever been a challenge with companies we've worked for that have large extended teams. I mean, we've done work with people who say, I have 40 direct reports, I have 80 direct reports, and they don't have enough time. They're doing one-on-ones perpetually at that level. So if you've got 10 plus, one of the things I'd recommend is that heat meetings could be very quick one-on-ones. Those might be 5-minute check-ins. And if you are someone who is, highly prioritized into time management, what you might do is just set up at the end of a day, one day a week or a couple times a week, there's 5, 10, 15-minute chunks that you're just going to be in Zoom or be on WebEx, and your team checks in. And it's you literally going through a heat meeting with them very quickly, but they come and meet you in your space. If they're hybrid, if they're in person, it may just be that you set up a time block, or to keep it time bound, maybe you do it online, half the time, and you do it in person the other half. The thing I've found beneficial or an advantage to being online, specifically in Zoom, there are apps that you can utilize in the App Store on Zoom. And one is a countdown clock. So if you're having a one-on-one with a teammate, you may have a chatty Cathy in your office that just goes on and on and on and needs to. But if they are limited a bit by a countdown clock, they may have a little more brevity in their answers. So I'll try and compress time by having a countdown timer going in our meetings, and maybe bake in a little bit of time in between. But that would be one way to do that. So heat meetings, keep them short. And again, whether it's once a month, once every 2 months, once a quarter, it probably needs to be an hour-long sit down where you go through focus areas, commitment, action items, expected results, and benefits. So that is how I would prioritize that, Samantha. Last comment on that is and maybe this is a question for you, are you a player coach? Meaning you have work to do and you're leading your team, in which case it's really, really important for you to prioritize how clear and aligned is your team, because that is going to help you move your division forward as much as you doing work is going to move them forward. There's a saying that we like to use at Renzo, and it's to elevate, you must delegate. So if you want to elevate the work you're doing, you must delegate some of it down to the people on your team. And that's where you just figure out who's motivated and driven by this kind of work, and how do I put it on their plate and make them feel like this is the greatest gift to mankind, that they just got this task, right? Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Samantha. Another question I was posed, and you answered this, well, it was part of the answer that you gave me, but how do you recommend getting to know employees who keep things close to the vest? I know you referenced that if you have trouble pulling that information out, there might be a lack of trust there. Yeah. But there also, I know, are individuals that, regardless of how much trust there is, they still can tend to keep things really close to the vest. So what are your suggestions there as far as trying to pull some of that information out if someone keeps things close to the vest? Great question.
It is a great question. And I'm going to make an assumption that quite often that person is likely either a driver or analytical. And it's not disparaging against those folks. Again, going back to one of the first sessions, what we would say is that a driver you might experience as cold and fast. They're just kind of quick and to the point. And why are you asking me these questions? I don't understand, why you need to know what my family situation is. Just tell me what I need to do. And cold and fast people, you may have a hard time, breaking through that barrier and getting to know, certainly in the immediate term, but over time, generally speaking, you'll get to know them. Analyticals we experience as cold and slow. So they're going to ask why a lot. Why are you asking me that? Why do you need to know that? Those kinds of things. And honestly, the way I would approach it is, I'm just interested. I'm just curious about your life and what I can do to help you get to the next step in your career. I mean, I'm literally just interested in you as a person. And so how do you do it for the people that hold those cards close to the vest? Be interesting. I'm sorry, be interested, not interesting. So be interested in them. The best example I can give, Brad, is there was a group that I worked with, and I walked in and they said, no one can crack this guy. He is like Fort Knox in terms of information about him. But I walk in, he's got photos on the back of his desk of his kids, of his dogs. He's got a photo of a camper, a teardrop camper. He's got all of these sort of medallion looking things on the shelf. And I went in and I said, Dale, I understand that you've been here X amount of years and that you're a guy who gets things done. And he's like, yep, I appreciate that. And I said, can I ask you a question? Tell me the story of the teardrop camper. And then he went on for 20 minutes about how he and his family love this teardrop camper and what they do. And, the medals are the softball league that he and his buddies play in. And I walk out and I said, the guy's an open book. No one's asking him questions about himself. They're just, they're not interested enough. And quite often I find that people bring the stuff that's important to them and set it all over their office, but it all just becomes wallpaper to people who walk in the office and want to be connected to them at the heart level, but never ask them about, what's with the ceramic cat on the windowsill? Are you into ceramic cats? And when we start asking those questions, it's interesting because then they open up. They want to share what's important to them. And there's a feeling of like, oh, you care. And so because you care about my ceramic cat collection, you must also care about me as a person.
Yeah. Flipping the script here, Samantha has posed another question. How do you and can you try and facilitate this with your own leadership team who tends not to check in with you?
Yeah, this is a big one. And again, in the nature of full transparency, I am probably guilty of this with my team. As much as we talk and do check-ins, I think there are times where they're saying, I want an hour of your time. And they may be reluctant to ask for it. Although now we're becoming much more clear about, if you want time with me, make sure you just grab time on my calendar, let me know what it's about, and then let's have the candid conversation. So if that's the case, Samantha, what I would recommend doing is going to, folks up the ladder and saying, could I get some coaching? Would it be possible just to carve out 30 minutes with you and get some coaching on something? And, what I found is that when you're asking for coaching, it also opens the door to give feedback, because someone might say, I didn't realize that you needed this, or is this helpful? And you could say, yes, in fact, I'd actually really like to meet with you on a regular basis because I'm feeling like there's not a lot of communication back and forth. So it's a really interesting paradigm that when you say, hey, could I get some coaching from you? It could be because you're trying to move the needle in a certain direction. And I've done it with some of my clients who say, yeah, we just can't get this contract through. We can't get a signature on this deal. And I said, try this, call up your contact or the contact's leader and just say, could I get some coaching from you? And what they're doing is you're asking them, could I get your help? And inherently, we all have this deep-seated desire to help each other. There is an entire industry that sprung up that many of you have probably been supportive of, and it's the fundraising industry in high schools. I mean, Brad, I got to believe that the hockey team probably sold cards or, wrapping paper or popcorn or something, right?
Anything and everything.
The pitch is you go to a neighbor and you're like, hey, would you mind helping my hockey team? Not, hey, do you want to buy really expensive wrapping paper? That's not the pitch. And yet those companies make millions and millions of dollars for schools every year because the pitch is, can I get your help? And the same question is, can I get some coaching? I'd love your help. I need some coaching on this. And the leader is going to say, yeah, absolutely. Let's carve time out. And then it opens the door for you to say, I really need this. This is what I'm not getting. Can I get this from you? A chance to give feedback without it feeling like feedback.
Good. Hopefully that answered the question. Another one posed here. How often should leaders be having the realignment conversations?
The realignment conversations, I think, are in the moment. And it's also kind of a cultural thing. So for what it's worth, some of you may want to just begin adopting clarity and alignment, clarity and alignment, clarity and alignment. People ought to hear it all over the map, everywhere in every office, clarity and alignment. And what will happen as you start to use that language more and more is when things go sideways between two people, two departments, a client and someone delivering, what you can say is, I think we need a clarity and alignment meeting because I think there's a lack of clarity or we are out of alignment. And so we use that language all the time, Brad, with our clients and internally. So there's a breakdown and we go, hey, I think we need a clarity and alignment meeting. And then we come into a Zoom room and we go, so this is the issue at hand that I was noticing. Was there a breakdown? Here is where I thought the clarity was. What was your level of clarity? And they'll say, oh, well, I thought we were doing this. And I go, okay, so we need to realign on what we're doing related to this particular code challenge or this client issue or this relationship we're building. And so how often do they need to be had? As much as you think they need to be had. And I would throw them out on a whim. Can we get a 10-minute clarity and alignment meeting on the books? And what I've found is that as soon as you have them, people leave and they go, that was awesome. I'm glad we did that. Because, and I'm sure the attendees can relate to this, that there are questions on a project. It's hard to get the other person on the call. Well, we'll just wait until our Monday check-in. Now 4 days have passed. A bunch of things, water's now under the bridge on a number of these decisions. And we're so far gone that people are like, are we really talking about that? Did that happen? Shoot, if we had just gotten on the call and knocked it out, everyone would be on the same page. So I find as much as necessary would be a good answer there.
Okay. And then last one, unless there's other ones that end up being posted, this is coming from me, kind of a skeptic's perspective, Adam.
Yeah.
Getting to know each other seems like it should be simple and fairly natural. And this has a feel of being a little bit more complex and a little bit more structured. So why make it more complex and structured? What's the importance of that and the value?
Yeah. Well, I think I was going to say for better or worse, but I think it's for worse. There aren't the coffee pot conversations as much as there were. There aren't the go have a smoke break conversations as there were. You know, that
Thank
is not.
goodness.
Say again.
I said, thank goodness.
Thank goodness. Yes, exactly. So there was an article I read, and it said, "Can we please bring back smoke breaks and or what was it? Smoke breaks and something else." And the whole gist of the article was that people knew each other when there were smoke breaks, because they'd go outside and they would, while they enjoyed a cigarette, they would chat with each other about what was going on at home and the kids and the family. And now we're doing more with less. So we don't have the breaks in between. We're not carving out time to go have coffee or have a lunch with people. Or again, in my opinion, I don't think companies are doing enough of the company retreats, the outings, hey, we're all going to meet at the bowling alley. We're going to go play pickleball today. And I get it. Some people are like, I don't want to do that. I'm at work all day. If we're getting time off, I just want to go home. But it's also critical to culture building and knowing each other that we do these things. So the reason I think we put some structure around it and we make some of this maybe somewhat complex, we got to get back to the heart of it, which is, hey, we work together. I like to know you. I spend more time with you than I do my family. We should probably know what drives each other.
Yep. Awesome. Makes sense. Well, good. That wraps up the questions. Thank you everyone for attending. Again, we've got 2 more sessions. Again, just a reminder, there will not be one in August. We did that strategically just because there's a lot of summer trips that are planned, and there just seems to be a lot of people on vacation and such. So you do have the opportunity to pre-register for the remaining 2 sessions, September, October. And to reiterate, you can also get all of the previous recordings at koniknetwork.com/leadership series. So I hope everyone has a wonderful day. And again, appreciate everyone joining us here today. Any final words, Adam?
Well, I think I first of all, I want to acknowledge and applaud everyone who shows up to these, because clearly, you likely saw this on LinkedIn. Maybe you got an email from Brad or Tom or the Konik network team, and you're here, and it's an hour invested in you becoming a better leader. So I acknowledge you. I applaud you for it. You will be a better leader just by applying even 1 or 2 of these ideas. And I hope for you that your team acknowledges it too, that they start to share more and more with you. And that the number one thing really in my mind as a takeaway is to dig down deep into what is the purpose of each of the people on your team. What is it that drives them? And if you know that, you can speak to that in the work that they're doing and how to motivate them on a day-by-day basis. So I acknowledge you, I applaud you, and I hope to see you in September, not in August. Have fun on the lakes in August.
Agreed. Thank you, Adam. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Brad.
Talk to you.
See y'all.